My name's Christina Hildebrand. I am the founder and president of Voice for Choice Advocacy, and we educate and advocate for informed choice and transparency of what goes into your body. I started doing these Q&As late last year because I get hundreds of emails every day, every week, asking questions, and some of them are similar questions. And so I figured I would do a Q&A, and they got such good responses that I'm keeping on doing them. For those of you who have just joined, there is a feature at the bottom of your Zoom that says Q&A. Please put the questions that you want answered in there. I will not be checking the chat. You're welcome to chat with others, but I won't be checking the chat. And if you see a question that you want answered, or rather than duplicating a question, feel free to use the thumbs up button in the Q&A, and that sort of promotes the questions up on my screen. I do plan to get through all the questions, so here we go. All right, so the first question is, what is your sense of the situation RE vaccine passports, airlines, large events? So interesting, tomorrow I'm hoping to put out a action item to the Voice for Choice advocacy list. Anyone who is watching this or registered for this will get signed up for the Voice for Choice advocacy list, if you email list, if you are not already. If you want to unsubscribe from that, you can just do that, but you will be added, so you will receive it. I'm doing a video on vaccine passports and an action item because I think it is absolutely topical. What do I think of them? So I do believe they are trying to be rolled out. I do believe that they are unconstitutional. I think it is probably, if there is one thing everyone, regardless of whether you believe in vaccines or not, regardless of what your stance is, it is the one thing that everyone should be against, because it is such a slippery slope. Having a vaccine passport, and the word vaccine passport is inaccurate, because basically right now what most of them would be asking you is proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test, or possibly both. So it's really, and interestingly, they don't allow for immunity. So if you had COVID and you show antibodies, there's no way of, most of them, from my understanding, there's no way of showing immunity, which really you should be able to do that if you can do the other two. I think that, currently what's supposed to be a vaccine passport is just that, but it has the potential to go completely rogue. We see it in China. I mean, I have a friend who lives in China, just moved back to China, lived here in the US for 5 years. She got back and she said, it is a completely different world than the one I left. The social credit score system there, I mean, they can track you. They track you everywhere. They have facial recognition everywhere. Your vaccine passport is much, much more than that. It tracks where you go. It tracks who you're in contact with. It tracks, has the potential to track anything and everything. It has the potential that if you are a Democrat and the Republicans are in office, that your vaccine passport is red right now. And there's nothing you can do to get it to be green, to travel, to go to large events. I think there are discrimination issues. I think there are discrimination issues from a medical perspective. I think there are discrimination issues from a disability perspective. I think there are discrimination issues from a vaccine access issue. So I think it is really dangerous. I think, if there is one thing we need to fight, it's these vaccine passports. We are going in a really bad direction. And, it's interesting because I looked back, I did a video in July of last year warning people that this was coming. And the thing is, they're not going to be mandated. Federal government, state government are not going to mandate this. But if you want to go anywhere, there's societal mandates. So in order to get into concerts, we've already seen it in California. So in California, I think it's the yellow tier or the orange tier, I don't remember, orange tier. You can have concert events, can have large sporting events with people, as long as everyone shows that they're either vaccinated or has a negative COVID test. That's the start of it. it is, if you don't have either of those, you're not going to concerts, you're not traveling, you're not, we saw in the European Union that they are trying to pass this as well, so that you cannot travel from one country to another without your green pass. I think, you know, I think everyone, as I said, regardless of what you think of vaccines, everyone should be super concerned, and this is not a partisan issue. As I said, I'm going to put out a video tomorrow, look out for it. I think it's forwarding that to everyone that you can. Our action item will have an advocacy link to it so that you can write to your legislatures, and it's about banning these. So the perfect executive order is or not the perfect, but a really great one is the one that Governor DeSantis in Florida put forward, because it not only says they're banned, but it also says that any business that is requiring them, there's an issue with that. You know, we see too often these right to refuse, or that it's your choice to refuse, right? Legislation that has that. That really does nothing. It's an example of that is the SB 277, where the personal belief exemption got taken away. The answer is, well, you don't have to vaccinate. Your child just can't go to school. You don't have to use a vaccine passport. You just can't fly, go to events, do anything in life. It is going to create two classes. It's going to create a vaccinated class and an unvaccinated class. I mean, we literally are back to segregation. And so I just, you know, everyone should be up against this. But net, I'm putting something out tomorrow with advocacy links where you can write letters to, and not just for California, but you can write letters to your governor, your legislatures, basically just saying, do not allow these, and they have to be banned. They have to be banned from businesses using them. I think it's going to be really hard in California to move that forward. But I think in other states, it will definitely happen. I think, you know, California, New York are, as with a lot of things, lost causes. Not that we shouldn't fight it. Don't get me wrong. Please don't get me wrong. We absolutely have to fight it. And you know, that's why I'm putting it out. But I really think it's an issue, because it's clear our governor and our public health department believe in these. Okay. Hopefully that answered that question. So next question. LAUSD is making teachers use a website called Daily Pass to keep track of COVID tests and vaccines in order to enter campus. Is this even legal? Is it legal? Yes, it's legal. Is it what you want to do? No, it isn't. Do you have a choice? Probably not. The key to these passes is who is behind them and what happens to the data. So you need to read the terms and conditions. And it's not that you can, you know, most of them are electronic. So you click on the terms and conditions and you either have to agree to them or not agree to them. You can't strike stuff out. But the two quick questions that I would ask any employer or school or anyone that is requiring these daily passes, or, you know, something electronic, is how long is the data kept? So how long are you keeping the information? Usually these daily, for those who don't know what this daily pass thing is, it asks you a set of questions like, you know, have you been around anyone who has COVID? Have you had a cough, or have you had, you know, any of these symptoms? And then it usually asks for, it may ask for, you know, COVID negative test. It may ask for your vaccine status. It may ask for your temperature, or they may take your temperature as you enter the campus. That is the more restrictive one, I will say. I'll get into a one that some of the private schools are using, which is even worse. But for that, so the questions that I would ask the school or whoever it is that's using this is, number one, how long is the information kept? Most of them are 14 days. And the question then becomes, is that after 14 days, is it deleted forever? You know, no, you cannot retrieve it in any way, anywhere. Number two, who is keeping that data? Who has access to that data? So is it only the school or the school district, your employer, or is it kept by the software company that has created this daily pass or whatever the app is? And if it's not just the school or your employer, then what are they doing with it? Do they get rid of it after 14 days, or is it backed up in the cloud forever after? The last question that I would ask is what happens to that data, specifically things like if you're being COVID tested, what happens to all of that information surrounding the COVID test, if it's, and any other information that's included in that app. So some of them go much further than just your health screening questions. I would really look into that and ask, and put your employer or your school district to task on it. Make sure that they have removed everything after 14 days. You can write letters to them and make sure that that is the case, that that's what they're doing. Keep them honest. So that's what I would recommend. I have one school that I'm aware of here in California. There are other schools, because on their website they show all these other schools, but there's one school here close to where I live in the San Francisco Bay Area that is requiring all teachers, all students, all staff to download a tracking app, a contact tracing tracking app, onto every device they have at school. So your personal phone, your computers, your iPads, any device that you have at school, it has to be on those devices, and it has to be on during the whole time that you're at school. And it basically traces you. So if you've been in the bathroom with another teacher and that teacher gets COVID, it's supposed to alert, all the people that teacher's been in contact with. But it is tracking you, and I can guarantee you that half the people don't turn it off when they leave school, and so it's tracking them everywhere. And to me, that is such a violation of privacy. I mean, for goodness sake, they're a school, they're a private school, they're not a large school. If somebody gets COVID, you know what class they've been in, you know who they've been in contact with, or you shut down the school for 2 weeks. But to me, the invasion of privacy at that level on school campus is just crazy. Anyway, hopefully that answers that question. Next question. I'm a physician who was giving medical exemptions back in the day. I'm hearing from a lot of patients whose children are entering kinder or 7th grade who tell me their schools will accept them as long as they have a plan to complete the required vaccines. Can you comment on this? I'm sure this does not meet the letter of the law, but do you think this will fly? My answer is kind of, and it depends on who the school is. So they should not be accepting medical exemptions that are, so let's talk about the letter of the law. The letter of the law is, if you are going into TK or kindergarten this year or 7th grade, that you are, this year being starting 2021 fall, that you are required to have your medical exemption go into the CareME system, and that's the only way of doing it. Your doctor has to submit it there. Now, for conditional entrance, which means that you have started vaccination, but you have not completed vaccination, there are some schools that will allow that slower or a catch-up schedule. But a doctor is required to write a letter for what that catch-up schedule looks like. So could you use your medical exemption and then come with a letter from a doctor saying, this is the plan of me completing the vaccinations? I think schools will probably allow that and call it a temporary medical exemption, or sorry, not a temporary, a conditional entrance. And a conditional entrance usually, if you have the strictest of the strict schools, which are usually public schools with nurses that are on top of this and making sure that everything is dotted and crossed, you would have to be on a catch-up schedule, which is a really aggressive schedule. So it means that on day 1 of your entrance, you have to be vaccinated with the first shot of every vaccine. You then have to follow the schedule that is basically at the very first opportunity that you can get the next dose, you get the next dose. So for things like DTaP that are a month apart, you would have to get them a month apart. For something like MMR, which is 6 months apart, you can wait 6 months to get it, but you're required to be on that really aggressive schedule. So as I said, the answer is it depends. And I think there are some schools that are willing to work with the parents and, want the kids in school and understand that they are on a schedule and that they have a plan. I think the biggest thing is that you have a plan. But there are also schools that I can guarantee you that do not follow that, and you have to have it by the letter of the law. And if you don't, you don't come to school. All right, next question. What is the best thing we can do right now to stop the mandate of these vaccines? Again, and I've said this all along, I do not think these vaccines will be mandated from a state or federal entity en masse. So I think they may be mandated, for example, from a much smaller, so kids in school. When these become eligible for children, I think they could become mandated for school. I think they could be mandated for healthcare workers. I think they could be mandated for other, specific groups of people. I don't think they will be mandated en masse. I think the other thing that we need to look at is how many boosters are going to be required. I think if there is a booster every year, like the flu shot, I just don't see them requiring them en masse again, because it's a lot of it's a lot of compliance that they have to deal with. Having said that, I do think there are societal mandates, and I think those come through vaccine passports. So I think those are, I addressed that question. I think the societal mandates are the biggest issue. And as I said, we will have an action alert. Voice for Choice Advocacy will have an action alert out tomorrow that will really, really counter that and do, be able to amplify that and the reasons for not wanting anyone to have a vaccine passport. Okay, next question. Do you fear that the current vaccines will somehow get FDA approval before trials end in 2022? I've seen speculation that this is a possibility. Thinking about this as it relates to legal matters and these vaccines not being mandated while under EUA. Absolutely. Pfizer and Moderna are slated to be fully approved by the end of this month or beginning of May. Yes, the vaccine trials have not been finished, and they won't be finished until 2022 or 2023, but they believe that they have enough data, 6 months worth of data, that any significant adverse reactions would have been caught by now. And so, and the other piece of it is the people getting the placebo, now that the vaccine is widely available to all age groups, the people getting the placebo who got the placebo in the trials, they are allowed to get the actual vaccine. So your placebo group has basically dwindled because, the reason why people go into vaccine trials is to get the vaccine. It's not to be part of the placebo. They all want the vaccine. And so therefore now that, April 15th here in California, everyone over 16 is eligible to get the vaccine. So come April 15th, there will be very few people in that placebo that have chosen to remain in the placebo and not get the vaccine. And so we have no real clinical trials anymore. But yes, they will be, I believe, and this is coming from all the people in the know in the vaccine industry, that Pfizer and Moderna will be fully approved by the end of this month or the beginning of May. As for the legal ramifications, I think you're referring to the legal cases that are using the EUA as the reason for not mandating vaccines. I have written to all of them and said, what happens in April or May? And their answer is, well, we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when that happens. We're not sure that that's really going to happen. I think it becomes a moot point, honestly, if they're fully approved. And so it becomes a moot point from the EUA perspective. I think there are still lawsuits to be had around vaccine mandates, but I think they will have to do with things like religious exemptions or medical exemptions. So, most employers, all employers should allow a religious exemption or a medical exemption or a disability exemption. Now, they can make accommodations, which means they can ask you, for example, to wear a mask, wash your hands, stay home, those types of things. But I can see the religious exemption some employer not holding up a religious exemption or not allowing a religious exemption, and that going to court. And I think in today's Supreme Court, I think we actually have a chance of winning that and actually getting that on record. But as I said, I think the EUAs are going away quickly. Okay, next question. Are there any marketing people who can help put a campaign together to emphasize safe and sane medical private practices, taking away from the focus of vaccines and emphasizing wellness and outstanding care plus track record? Okay, so I think I'm understanding this question, but if I'm not, feel free to put another question in. My guess is you are referring to doctors, physicians, acupuncturists, chiropractors, you know, basically people who don't necessarily condone vaccines, but are looking at health and wellness and that type of thing. I think it is really hard to, so putting together a campaign is one thing. Finding those people is another thing. And I think the key there is, and what we found during SB 27 or after SB 277 was, you know, any list that lists doctors in your area that are safe and sane, as you say, is a prime list for witch hunting and taking doctors down. You know, my feeling is, it's part of why I put together, or we put together, Stand Up California, which I'll talk a bit about in a bit, but you know, is to connect local people so that you can go to, actually, let me take a step back and just explain Stand Up California for those of you who aren't on our list or who didn't see it today. So Voice for Choice Advocacy launched a grassroots effort called Stand Up California, that basically it has 3 prongs to it, or actually 2 prongs to it. One of the prongs is to give activists the ability to talk to their local officials with succinct, researched talking points on a variety of issues. We may not agree on all of the issues, but you know, find the one that you want to champion and take that one on. That's one prong of it. The other prong of it is to allow people on a county level to come together and to discuss and to share ideas and to, you know, to share practitioners, those types of things, to be able to say, you know, I'd really like to find an acupuncturist. Does anyone have one that you can recommend? To the county group. We are being careful with who we allow into the groups, but, you know, we have to realize that anyone could actually come in. So you want to be careful on that front, but because we're doing it on a county level, it kind of, you know, it's very unlikely, or we won't, if somebody signs up for every list on there, we're not going to like let them in. So that's kind of where I was going with that. But I think that's where I would look, you know, somewhere like that is where I would look to get the referrals to safe and sane medical practices. I think there is a campaign to be had, but it's something so big, and I would honestly, I think it requires the organizations or the associations that are affiliated with those practices. So for example, the Chiropractor Association, either California or nationwide, homeopathy, acupuncture, naturopath, those types of things. All of those, each of those have their own organizations, but those organizations either independently or together, coming together to create a campaign of alternative health, basically. I will say, pharma will outspend you and make it very hard, but I think it's worth doing. I do. Are there any marketing people who can help? Oh, sorry, I answered that question. Next question. Can you detox from the J&J shot? Good question. I don't think it's shown that you can yet, but I also don't think that it is impossible to do. So to be clear, the J&J shot, so the mRNA technology, that's Pfizer and Moderna, both of those are messenger RNA vaccines. They basically tell your body to create the spike protein, and then antibodies go against the spike protein. Those, I think there is no way to really detox from them effectively that we know of right now, because they're so new. The technology is so new. So the J&J shot actually does the same thing. So it just has the spike protein, the human spike protein, that's put onto another full protein, the COVID spike, SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. And so it's put into your body and you're creating the antibodies. Now, I talked to my naturopath about it, and she said, you know, if there's one shot she felt comfortable that she could detox people, it was the J&J shot. But the mechanism at the end is the same. The sort of making your body into a mass cell replication, or a mass, you know, spike protein replication, and then the antibodies coming on it, is the same for both vaccines. So your answer is, I don't think we really know whether we can detox from the J&J shot. It has polysorbate 80 in it, but other than that, it doesn't actually have, you know, it doesn't have aluminum in it, doesn't have any other heavy metals. So from a perspective of detox, which is taking stuff out of your body, there's not much there to detox. So can you detox polysorbate 80? Yeah, you can. But other than that, there's not much there. It's the mechanism on both of these shots or both of these technologies, that is the novel thing. And they're not like regular vaccines that, or old style vaccines that you definitely can detox from. Hopefully that answered that question. Okay, next question. I own a healthcare business. How do I keep my patients when they only want to come in if I've had my vaccinations? What is the best explanation as to why I'm holding off? So I would actually flip the narrative on this. And whenever somebody asks me, have you been vaccinated? My answer to them in a point blank face is, do you have HIV? Because to me, that question is a comparable question. You're asking about my personal medical health. When you ask somebody, do you have HIV? They look at you and they go, what? Why are you asking me that? And that opens the door for me to explain that medical privacy is incredibly important, and that we cannot ask people their medical history or what medical treatments they've had. I mean, no one would ever come up to you and say, oh, do you have HIV? Because it's just not the thing you do. So that's my key, is opening the discussion about medical privacy. I think it is horrific, the amount that people are talking about vaccines. I think it is, and asking people, are you vaccinated? Now, if I want to share, I'm vaccinated, or I'm HIV positive, or I have cancer, or I have, you know, any of that, that's my personal business if I want to share that. But for somebody to ask you if you're vaccinated, that goes against all medical privacy. And I think it's, as I said, I think it's horrendous that we're at a point where people feel free to ask that question. I think, and I will say, as I had a friend of ours that we went to dinner on Saturday too, and she pointed out that it's because of the media. So the media is talking about vaccines nonstop. Everywhere you look, everyone is talking about vaccines nonstop. If they were talking about daffodils, and the fact that daffodils are blooming late this year, and they're blooming in April, and very few bloomed in March. If that was all over the news and that's all you heard, I can guarantee you, when you go talk to people, they would go, oh, how are your daffodils doing? I only had 3 bloom last month, but I've got a whole bunch coming in April. And it's because of the media that it becomes okay to talk about it, or that it becomes the topic to talk about. So, you know, my feeling on this is, you don't talk about it. You make the person realize that they are in the wrong asking you that private medical history. For people who have businesses and who say, you know, patients who say, well, I won't come to you if you're not vaccinated. First of all, and I understand you need money. I understand it's an income, so don't get me wrong on this. But my first question is, are those the people that you want in your practice? You want the people that, from the previous question, that are looking for safe and sane practitioners. So I would look to, you know, it goes into that marketing campaign for that, because those are the people who you want to attract to your business. The other thing that I would put it on them and say, oh, and again, I'm all about education. I would flip it on them and say, oh, well, it doesn't really matter whether I've been vaccinated. I prefer not to share my medical history, but it doesn't really matter if I've been vaccinated, because you've been vaccinated. And if you've been vaccinated, you know, you are preventing transmission. You know, you aren't likely to get COVID, or at least get a bad case of COVID. So my vaccination status shouldn't affect you. Will there be some people who don't like that as an answer? Yes. I don't think there's anything you can do for them, because they're not going to come in anyway. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter say, well, I have a medical issue that I can't be vaccinated. They're not going to come to you. That's not going to change their mind. Hopefully that answered that question. All right, next question. Are the saliva COVID tests that are accepted when you have to prove negative COVID for travel? Oh, are there? I don't trust the swab test. I believe it is contaminated, plus it's invasive to the body. So there are. So there are certain COVID saliva tests that are valid for international travel. So one of the ones that I know of is the one that Costco has. And with that, or with any of the saliva tests that you do at home, you basically you do the test in front of somebody on something similar. It's HIPAA compliant, but it's something similar to a Zoom call. And they are sitting opposite, showing that you show yourself spitting in, you show yourself closing it, you show yourself packaging it up, putting it in the box and sending it off. And those are allowed for travel. The other thing is to do it in person. I don't know of any COVID tests that are done in person that are available to the public. So, I know there are schools that use them. I know there are employers that use them, but I don't know of any specific that are used for travel. But the key thing with travel that they want is that they want to know that it's you who did it. So that's the piece. That's the compliance piece for most travel. It is for at least Hawaii and I think Europe. Okay, next question. Do you think that the COVID vaccine will become mandatory for high school students in California? I fear that. I do. I think that the 12 to 15-year-olds will become eligible for the vaccine by September under emergency use. I don't think they will become fully approved by the FDA for teens, probably until the beginning of 2022. So I could see, and here in California, I wouldn't be surprised if this is Senator Pan's last hurrah, is to have the COVID vaccine be mandatory for example, 7th grade entry. And that is his last hurrah in 2022. I think it also depends on where we're at with the number of variants, with how COVID has progressed, whether we're seeing adverse reactions to the vaccine. I mean, I still think it's really early to tell the long-term effects. I think we don't know whether there are long-term effects when somebody has been exposed to COVID and has been vaccinated. Does the COVID vaccine actually work? The trials looked at 2 weeks after COVID was given, and then they've done month, 2 months, 3 months, but they haven't looked at 6 months, a year down the road at whether the people who got the COVID vaccine are still, they can't because there haven't been that many months of the trial, but they haven't looked at how long the efficacy of the vaccine is, how efficacious it is various strains. I mean, I think there were over 200, around 250 people in Michigan that got the vaccine and got COVID. Things like that. I think we have to see where it's going. I'm not sure that it will be made mandatory for high schoolers. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know whether that will pass. In California, I am skeptical, and I think it may, but I think it won't happen until, I think it'll go through the legislature in 2022 and go into effect probably 2023. And the next question somebody's going to ask, I'm sure, is, does the medical exemptions that you have on file, will they count? And the answer to that is, if they are 7th grade entrants, they're not going to count anyway. And my guess is other people are going to be grandfathered in. And so that would be one scenario, but it really depends on what the legislature says and whether it, what provisions it puts in as to whether they are grandfathered or not. So I went a bit further on that one because I'm pretty sure that's a question that will come up in answer to that question. Next question. I've been making it clear to family and friends that I will not be getting vaccinated. I can already feel that I'm being treated differently. While I suspect that it will not work, why is it not a good argument to ask that if they are vaccinated, how do I pose any kind of threat to them by being vaccinated? Absolutely. I think, that's my question to people. If you're unvaccinated, the only threat you are is to yourself, because they haven't shown that vaccines don't stop transmission. So they're your equal if you're unvaccinated or vaccinated. They think they do stop some transmission. If you get the vaccine, it is not that you won't get COVID, but that you will get less symptoms. You're less likely to get severe symptoms or go to the hospital. So that's why they're taking the vaccine. Well, being around an unvaccinated person shouldn't matter. And I would make that argument. Again, I flip it on other people. And I talk about, I think, to me, there are some people that are completely shut down, that you're not going to change their minds. But I think to a lot of people on this vaccine especially, there's an opportunity for education. And you have to realize that if they've already gotten their vaccine, they're going to come from a very defensive place because they chose to get the vaccine. So you have to be empathetic. You have to look at it from their perspective. They are vaccinated, so they can't unvaccinate themselves. So how can you talk to them about your concerns with the vaccine, and that they have every right to take the vaccine, but you're choosing not to, and sort of those decisions and your decisions, and their decision making may have been different. I have said it before in the Q&A. My dad got the vaccine. He believes that if he would get COVID, he would die. He's older. He has chronic conditions. He has comorbidities, and more than one. And so his feeling was, I educated him on everything. And the question I asked him was, would you be willing to be part of the clinical trials? And initially he said no. And then he said yes. By the time he got to the point of wanting the vaccine, he said, you know what, I thought about it and I'm willing to take that risk. And so, you have to realize, you have to treat those people with empathy. You can't get angry and attack, because it doesn't help anyone if you're trying to educate. Next question. Is it possible that vaccinated people will be asymptomatic super spreaders, especially next flu season? Possibly. The results have not come out from the clinical trials of whether asymptomatic spread is possible by vaccinated people. To me, it's amazing that that wasn't included in the initial clinical trials as an endpoint, but it wasn't. So I think there are ongoing studies, and I think my guess is in the next 6 months we'll have the results, sort of more conclusive results. I also think it's, it'll be interesting with the variants, what that does to asymptomatic spread. I also question, the likelihood of actual asymptomatic spreaders. From what we know of COVID and the PCR tests, my guess is those people who are considered asymptomatic really have just very low levels of COVID, either because they've been exposed to it and it's remnants or something, but they're false positives basically, or they are just pre-COVID. So in the couple of days before they actually show symptoms of COVID, that's when they are. So I question how many asymptomatic people we really have that have COVID. Okay, next question. What type of doctors can write exemptions? So medical exemptions for school can only be written by MDs or DOs in California. For COVID vaccinations, there's no requirements for exemptions. So there's no laws around exemptions, medical exemptions. So it's really what your institution, your employment, your organization will allow. So for example, the UC schools have a form for medical exemptions, and it can be signed off by an MD, a DO, an RN, or a physician's assistant, PA. So that's their criteria. So it's really, really dependent on your, who you're giving it to and what they require. How can we stop the California large gathering events COVID test or proof of vaccination required for indoor meetings? The California Department of Health said the new guidelines for indoor meetings across the state go into effect April 15th. Yes, so I answered that question. If you were not at the beginning of this, go back and listen to the answer to the first question. Next question. Our boss is mandating the shot by April 15th. He has an ego larger than anyone. He thinks he knows more about science than any doctor or scientist. He will fire us on the spot, no questions asked, for not getting the shot. Your letter is great, but I don't think he will agree with it because he knows more. How do I deal with the bullying and still keep my job over 20 years? So my number one question to you is, do you really want this job? Do you really want to work for somebody like that? And again, I say this on most of my things, and I understand this is your job of 20 years. But I'm guessing you could find another job that you would be so much happier in, or that you would go out on your own and become an entrepreneur. And I know that's scary. I know that's super scary, but you can do it. And when you do it, I promise you'll be so much happier. So that's my number one thing. If you're going to stay, my recommendation to any employer is to ask them for their religious exemption form. And if they say they don't have one, or they're not allowing religious exemptions, then I would just write a letter with your sincere religious beliefs. And a Voice for Choice Advocacy, I'm happy if you email me with your religious beliefs. I'm happy to help you write, to work out the wording for that. But I would, and for somebody like him, I may not even ask him for a religious exemption form or how you apply for it. I would just come with a letter that is your religious exemption and that states the law, the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, that states that a religious exemption is required by employers, and I would hand that to him. And if he fires you, you have a discrimination lawsuit going, and he would be really, really stupid. I know you say he knows better, but he would be really stupid to do that. So I think that's where I would go with it. That's how I would do it. But I really, my real question to you is, do you really want to work for this person? I personally wouldn't. Okay, next question. Last night I heard the vaccine is good for 6 months. Please comment on future yearly vaccines for all. Is it true? I don't think we know, because I don't think we know what the vaccine is good for. The trial started last July, August. So we were into about 6, 7, 8 months of data, and most people haven't gotten them. So while now everyone's eligible, the majority of people that have gotten the vaccines are elderly, healthcare workers. They're different people. And so It's not widespread. So I don't think there's an answer of it's good for 6 months. Do I think there will be booster shots? I do, because I think there are going to be variants. I think these viruses are clever. Any virus, bacteria is clever. They're going to mutate, and so they're going to become, if the vaccine is stopping them from one mutation, they're going to mutate, and we've already seen that. So I do think it depends on the number of variants. It depends on the virility, so to speak, of the new mutation. So do I think it could happen? I do think it could happen. I think, the other question I have is for something like the Pfizer and Moderna, the second vaccine, the second dose, puts a lot of people into bed for 2 days. So what's the third dose going to do? I mean, I don't think it's going to be any easier in the third dose. So I think it's in fact going to get much worse. And so, once they start giving a third dose and people are having severe reactions, not just swelling or rashes or something else, or, feeling like they've got the flu or headaches, migraines, once they have a really bad reaction to the third dose, will they get any more? I think it really, we need to see how it all plays out. I don't have an answer for it. Do I think they could? Yes, I do, but I don't think they have an answer to it. Okay, next question. Do you have any information about a link between vaccinations and cancer? That might be helpful to people who have had to make a decision and have been dealing with cancer before. So the answer to that is not directly, but every single vaccine out there has a section 13.1, and the COVID vaccines don't have a package insert, they have an EUA summary. But it's section 13.1 of every vaccine states that the vaccine has not been tested for carcinogenicity, so cancer causing, for mutagenicity, so for changing your DNA, or for infertility. Few of them have been tested for infertility in mice, but they have not been tested for infertility in humans. So in that sense, it's not a link, but it shows that that's never been studied. I personally have no evidence of this. I personally think it has been studied, and the vaccine manufacturers have just chosen not to release the data, because I think if it had been studied and the data was positive, they would have said they've studied it. Why haven't they studied that in the 50 years that most of the vaccines have been on the market? They should have studied it, but they haven't. They choose not, or they choose not to study it. As for the mRNA vaccines and even the J&J vaccine, they are based off replication. And the only two times, or not the only two times, but 2 times when your body replicates cells is cancer and is when you're pregnant and have a fetus in you. And so my question is, what do these vaccines do to your autoimmune system, to those cancer cells? If they're revving up the system to replicate cells, what happens if they're replicating cancer cells? What happens to your fetus if they're replicating cells? Anyway, there is no direct link. There's no research that's been done, but there's definitely stuff that says the research hasn't been done. So if I had cancer, I would be very concerned. Or if I didn't have cancer, I would be very concerned too. Okay, next question. My child is on a medical exemption now, but will have to be vaccinated to return to school next year. Is there any way to avoid vaccinating her, but keep her in public school? I cannot homeschool and feel like I have no other choice at this point. We're in California. You don't. So if your child has special needs in an IEP, they're exempt from the vaccination laws. So that's the one sort of out for that. But in order to get an IEP and keep an IEP, it's really hard in California or in any state. I mean, your child has to have true special needs. And the other piece is, I've had parents say, well, my child has a speech issue and they're entering kindergarten. So I think, I definitely could get an IEP. And my question is, well, how long can you keep that IEP? Because if your child just has minor speech issues, you may be able to get an IEP this year, but if their speech issues clear up, then what are you going to do in first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, etc.? So that's the IEP. Your other options, the only other options you have, are to vaccinate, to homeschool, or to move out of state, unfortunately. You can, the other option is to get another medical exemption, but it is impossible because of the witch hunt after the doctors that we're giving them, and because of the really strict criteria that are in place this year. So those, unfortunately, are your only options. Next question. How can I work with the owner of my office building, as I'm an independent business owner, to not wear masks or get rid of the signs that promote masks? The mask issue is one that I really don't see. It's a really hard one. Let me put it that way. I think I don't think you're going to get away from the promotion signs, because those are put out by CDPH. Unless your office building owner, doesn't believe in masks, I don't think you're going to get around them. As for you, having a place in the office and walking through it, I think it is hard. I mean, I think you could, not do it and see what they say. But I don't think there's, could they, look at what your lease says, could they get you out of the, out of there? I think legally, once you're inside your own office, and inside your business, then you can do what you want. But outside of your business, when you're walking through the hallways, that kind of thing, I do think they can, they can require it. Do you have to do it? No. I mean, I wonder, if you didn't wear your mask, what would happen? I would give it a try. I think the masks are a difficult one, and it's a matter of standing up and not wearing them and seeing what the option is. Next question. My husband works for the San Diego School District, and they are setting up COVID testing. He has gotten emails that this is mandatory. What rights does he have not to get it? I've tried to look this up, but the verbiage is so confusing. I've said this before, and I honestly don't think there is a way around testing unless you have enough people complaining about it. I think it also depends how much they are testing. So CDPH put out testing guidelines for schools, depending on what tier you're in, how many times you should be tested, how often you should be tested, whether asymptomatic people should be tested, that kind of thing. I think if they are testing more than the guidelines, which actually, I think it's, if you're in the red tier or the orange tier, it's once every 2 weeks. I think once you get to the orange tier and yellow tier, it's not testing asymptomatic people or surveillance testing, which is basically testing everyone. I think there's some random testing. So I would look at that and look at what the guidelines are there, and basically, complain to that level. Can he get out of it completely? I don't think so, unless he has, 100 other people by his side and everyone's complaining about it. COVID testing is similar to other things that teachers have to go through. I mean, you have to go through TB testing, you have to go through fingerprinting. This is a public health measure, or seen to be a public health measure. And so it's really, it's a hard one to fight to get out of, because it's not invasive. The other thing that I would do is, if you have swabs, so nasal swabs or throat swabs, I would ask for saliva testing to be done, or if you can do an alternative saliva testing and give those results. So those are my comments on that. Next question. How will vaccine cards be authenticated? Will there be a central database? So this is an interesting question. No, currently vaccine cards are given to you when you get vaccinated. The providers are supposed to put your details into the immunization registry, which is a state-based registry. So every state has an immunization registry. In California, it's called CAIR, C-A-I-R, California Immunization Registry. The details are supposed to be put in there for any vaccine that you're given by your provider. But many providers are not signed up for care. So you have to have special, as a doctor, you have to have special training for it. You have to pay money to have the system, you know, to access the system. And so many individual doctors are not signed up for it. Pharmacies are, large hospitals are, the vaccinations, you know, super centers probably are. I don't actually know whether they are, but I'm going to guess that they are. And so those providers, if you get vaccinated, will enter it into the care system. But realistically, your proof is your vaccine card. And I think down the road, as more vaccines, so for example, the J&J vaccine doesn't need to be specially frozen or you know, kept at a certain, it needs to be refrigerated, but it, you know, doctors who vaccinate refrigerate vaccines. And so as the J&J vaccine is distributed to individual doctors' offices, so you can go to your own doctor and get the vaccine, I think there will be less and less centralization. So I think right now there are a lot of people who are in the database, but I don't think there are, or a larger proportion are in the database. I think once it gets more widespread, especially if there's a yearly vaccine that's given by your doctor, I think that will become less centralized, and not as many people will be in the database. Next question. I am on a nurse Facebook page, and the question was, have you been seeing COVID positive patients weeks after people have been fully vaccinated? The overwhelming answer has been yes. Many nursing homes and convents, same thing. No COVID, get the vax, and then the vax positive and even deaths. Why do you think this is happening? Well, I think, you know, the obvious answer is the COVID vaccine doesn't work fully, and it's not as efficacious as we think it is. I think that it's, you know, I think that it may be that there's something in the vaccine that is causing people to have the symptoms weeks later or to be affected by it differently. There's, you know, ADE, which is something in antibody dependent enhancement, which basically is that the antibodies are non-neutralizing. So when you get COVID, the antibodies that you've created will not, you know, will not attack the COVID disease virus that you've been infected with, and in doing so creates an even worse reaction to your body having to that virus, to the COVID virus that you're exposed to, and creating a complete cytokine storm. And that was the reason why a COVID vaccine had not been created thus far, because of that. And so is it possible that we're seeing that? Absolutely. I don't think we're going to see the full effects of this for, you know, probably 6 months. I mean, people have to be exposed to COVID. The interesting thing is that you know, only 2% of the population has COVID at any one time. So the likelihood that you're actually exposed to COVID is relatively low. Could there be something else that the vaccine is doing to create the symptoms? Possibly. I think the big thing is we have no idea, because none of these vaccines have been fully studied. You know, we're not at the end of the 2 years of the clinical trial. I tell people, come back to me in 2 years and I can tell you the story. But right now, we're still in the midst of having no idea what these vaccines really do and how they really work on the body and what else. I mean, we know what they're supposed to do, but we have no idea how they're affecting the whole immune system. The whole immune system is incredibly complex and has so many, I mean, we don't understand the whole immune system. You know, there is so much there that we have no idea about. So, you know, to be able to say, oh, you give this vaccine and this is going to happen. Well, you may give the vaccine and this does happen, but what the heck else in the whole immune system is happening as well? We don't know. Anyway, next question. Can we claim the Roe versus Wade ruling? It's a private decision, my body, my choice. Yes, I do believe you can. And I mean, most people don't realize that that's what Roe versus Wade is. Most people think Roe versus Wade is, oh, you can get an abortion. But what Roe versus Wade actually ruled on was exactly that, was privacy, was that it's between my doctor and myself what private medical treatment I have. So I do think, and it's amazing to me that the people who are so adamant about keeping Roe versus Wade don't see this, don't see it clearly. Probably mostly because they don't understand what Roe versus Wade actually said. Next question. I heard that doctors are hesitant to give medical exemption due to a couple of reasons. One, they are placed under a microscope from then on by the AMA or whichever watchdog agency monitors them. And two, they are only allotted a set amount of exemptions a year. Is this accurate? So it is and it isn't. So for school in California, those two statements are mostly true. So for children to get a medical exemption to go to school, if a doctor writes an exemption, if a doctor writes more than 4 exemptions a year, all of their medical exemptions are reviewed that are in the system. So that 5th exemption triggers that. And so most doctors don't want to write more than 4 exemptions, because once you get placed under review by the medical board, you're being scrutinized, and the likelihood of the medical board finding something, even if it's not medical exemption related, wrong with you, because they make money every time they find something wrong with you, is highly likely. So most doctors won't even write the 4 medical exemptions, because which 4 people are they going to give them to? Which 4 patients are worthy? Is it, the worst ones? Is it the first 4 in the year? Who is it? The other thing that triggers a review of them is if the school has a vaccination rate of less than 95%. And so even if they have just written 4, if the school's below that and there's one of their exemptions, they start getting under the microscope and reviewed. So most doctors are extremely hesitant. Now that's for school children. For adults, for example, the COVID vaccine and employment, there are no laws around that. The doctors, the pediatricians that were writing medical exemptions for school are very hesitant, and they're just very aware of the situation. But there are doctors, as I said, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a doctor, that are willing to write medical exemptions for the COVID vaccine for adults. Next question. If Governor Newsom gets recalled and Senator Pan and Gonzalez are gone, will we have a chance to overturn any of the laws they had put in place, such as SB 277 and SB 276? So I think the answer to that is it depends on who Governor Newsom is replaced with. So the real question is, will they run a Democrat as an alternative? And there are from the Democrat side, there are pros and cons of that. So if you don't put a Democrat on the ticket, then Governor Newsom is your Democrat, and does he get recalled or not? And right now, the polls in California are saying that he would not get recalled. If it happened today, he would not get recalled. And you have to remember, 75% of the electorate that are voters are registered Democrats. So the number of people that are Democrats in our state, just the virtue of that, if they vote down party lines, they're going to vote with Newsom. Now, I think there are absolutely Democrats who are pissed off with him because he closed all the businesses down, because he basically ruined California for a year. So I don't think I don't think all 75% are going to vote for him, but I think there's a large chunk that would vote for him if there's no other Democrat on the ticket, because they don't want a Republican in his place. If there is a Democrat running, the question is, who is that Democrat, and are they any better than Newsom? And I would be hard pressed to find someone. There are a couple, don't get me wrong, there are a couple that could and that would be better than Newsom. Regardless of if there is a Democrat or not. So if there is a Democrat, it would also split Newsom's vote, right? So people would maybe want to recall Newsom, but give the Democrat their vote. So that sort of is a split vote there. Although everyone, even if you say yes, you don't want to recall Newsom, everyone gets to choose who they would like in his place. if it's a Republican that wins the governorship, he has 1.5 years, or 1 year really, until re-election. And so the question then becomes, can he be re-elected? So we saw with Josh Newman, who is a Democrat, who voted for the gas tax, and he was recalled. And 2 years later, when, and Ling-Ling Chen, Senator Ling-Ling Chen, took his place. And 2 years later, last year, he went and he regained his senator spot, his district. And so the question becomes, can whoever it is that's put in place, can that person win a general election the following year? And what you have to realize is the way the recall works is there's one question that says, do you want to recall Governor Newsom? Yes or no? And then there's another question that says, if he's recalled, who would you like to be governor? And that list can have 100 people on it. And in 2003, there were 132 people on that list. Now, 3 of them got the majority of the votes, but that's who was on the list. And so Newsom can lose by 51%, and the person that's elected may only have 30% of the vote, or they could, if there's 100 people, they could have 2% of the vote and win it. If everyone got 1% and they got 2%, you know, they could win it with that. Well, going into a general election the following year, Newsom would win again. So the real question is who gets elected, and can they get reelected the following year? If we get a Republican or somebody that is pro, you know, parental choice, Senator Pan and Lorena Gonzalez are gone in 2022, so 2023. We still have a majority Democrat. And I know I'm sounding really pessimistic here, but we still have a supermajority. It will be close to a supermajority if they don't have a supermajority of Democrats in both the Assembly and the Senate in California. We have to convince 50% of the legislature, so a whole load of Democrats, that they want to repeal SB 277. So Voice for Choice Advocacy is working constantly on this and working out strategy. And we have partners, other organizations that we work with on a weekly basis, that we are looking at our strategy of what does that look like over the next 3 to 5 years. It is not going to be easy. I will also say, I think our biggest issue isn't actually the legislature. Our biggest issue is some of the people in California that are really, and I understand they're really pissed off, they're really angry, but they don't help our cause. You know, I'll take the examples of, you know, throwing menstrual blood on the Senate floor. That threw us back, through Voice for Choice Advocacy and the groups that were professionally lobbying in Sacramento, threw us back enormously. There are a few people that go to Sacramento for every hearing and yell at Senator Pan. I get they're angry. I get they don't feel like we're doing anything, and that's the way to go. And that's, you know, that's their right. It's their First Amendment right to do that. But it does not help us in that building at all. And I think the fractionation of California, because we are so large, is probably our greatest issue in overcoming these laws. You know, my feeling is, and this is my personal feeling, is we need to get out of the system. We're more likely to win this out of the system than in the system. We need to create homeschool co-ops. We need to create, you know, I'm a big believer in agorism, so I did a video on it. You know, if you go look on our YouTube channel, watch it. It's about activism on one side, which I do think we have to continue to play a role in, but it's also on the other side, this getting out of the system, getting out of the government, where the government holds the power over you. You know, if we were all to get up and say, you know what, we don't need medical exemptions. We're all going to homeschool together. We're all going to work out, you know, a co-op. You know, I couldn't homeschool myself. But, you know, would I consider a co-op? Yeah. If my kids were younger, I mean, I have teenage kids, so they're in high school. I don't really want to teach them in any way. But, you know, I think we need to look at getting out of the system on many fronts, not just the schooling front, on financial fronts, on food fronts, on a whole load of things, and creating local communities. And that's part of why, you know, we created Stand Up California to help that. All right, next question. There are also parents on Facebook forums who plan to find out if a child's teacher is vaccinated. If the teacher is not vaccinated, they will pull their child from the class. As a teacher who is not planning to get vaccinated, how do I deal with this witch hunt and discrimination? I would ask your school, and both of my kids' school put out their principal put out in a weekly newsletter that goes out. Please do not ask your teachers whether they are vaccinated. This is personal medical information. So number one, I would ask your school to put something like that out. But number two, go back to the question that I answered this, which is they have no right to ask you that question, and you need to make that clear. Next question. I'm concerned that vaccinated nurses and doctors can potentially infect patients because they may not know they are sick. What is your opinion on this? So you're talking about asymptomatic spread, and there is a possibility of that. So there is a possibility of transmission when you have been vaccinated. I think the chance of it is relatively small. I think of the pertussis vaccine, for example. There are thousands of pertussis cases. Pertussis is whooping cough. There are thousands of whooping cough cases every year. We never hear about them, and they're usually all among vaccinated people, because the majority of people are vaccinated. But we don't worry about that very much. So, you know, doctors and nurses, you know, whatever you feel about masks, doctors and nurses are wearing masks. So at least there's, you know, it doesn't prevent everything going through. They don't work 100% for sure, but it, you know, there's a little bit of a barrier there. I think if you're going to the hospital every day and every week, you know, and you're constantly around doctors and nurses, possibly, but it's not something that I would really be that concerned about. Hi there. My husband is an RN at 2 hospitals in the Bay Area. Can he legally refuse the COVID vaccine if mandated at work? He needs to see what their policy is, but yes, there is a right of refusal. The issue with the right of refusal is that, or you can fill out a declination form is what it is. The issue with that is he can be fired for refusing, so that they don't have to give a reason why. If he fills out a religious exemption, it's much harder to fire him because it becomes a discrimination case. So legally, you know, I would recommend a religious exemption. One thing that I get asked about religious exemptions is you don't have to be part of an organized religion in order to claim religious exemptions. They can't be moral, they can't be ethical, they can't be personal beliefs. They have to, you know, there has to be a belief that there's a higher power that is telling you that you need to keep your body clean, that you need to, you know, not inject stuff into it. Definitely needs to be, it doesn't need to be God, but there needs to be some higher power telling you this, rather than just your belief that you don't want to get the vaccine. Okay. The vaccine supporters, how do they explain why cells that end up producing and displaying SARS-CoV-2 antigen do not get destroyed by the immune system? I'm not sure I understand your question. I believe they do. I've never heard them saying that you know, that there aren't antibodies. I think you may be referring to my statement that, you know, antibody testing doesn't count as a viable option, for example, in the vaccine passport. I don't understand that. I don't understand why you couldn't have an positive antibodies, and for you not to use that as proof. You know, if I believed in vaccine passports, I would want that to be a criteria, an option. The trials that are being done on mRNA vaccines, do they regularly test all participants for the presence of SARS-CoV-2 in their nostrils? What prompts them to test? So no, amazingly enough, so after you get the mRNA vaccines or the J&J vaccine, any vaccine in these trials, they're not, if I were to set up a trial, I would test, on a weekly basis, I would test these people and see whether they're coming back positive. That's not what they do. If you have the vaccine and you have symptoms of COVID, then they talk to you, and then they may get you tested. But they absolutely don't do, specific testing after so many weeks or weekly testing or anything like that in the vaccine trials. So the answer is there's really no answer, none of that happening. Okay, if students are forced to take the COVID vaccine, which one do you suggest? So when you say students, I am assuming you mean like elementary school, high school students. For college students, most colleges have religious exemptions. So I would look at what religious exemptions are available or what exemptions are available to those students. For, let's take high school students. If I were forced to take a vaccine, at this point, I would get the J&J vaccine. I would get the J&J vaccine because at least that technology has been used and fully FDA approved in the Ebola vaccine. Is that enough for me? No, it's not enough for me because this specific vaccine hasn't been tested, but the methodology has at least gone through full FDA approval. The other piece of it is one shot and not two. And so you're dealing with one shot and it is more likely that you can detox from it. Although I don't think anyone's really shown that you can fully detox from it. So my answer right now is the J&J vaccine, but I take the liberty to change that answer in the future because the clinical trials haven't been done. The one vaccine that I would steer clear of is the AstraZeneca vaccine because of the blood clotting issues in Europe, but that's not available here in the US. Can you comment on the censorship of any media that questions COVID and vaccines? Is everyone moving to Parler, or what platforms are really free, and where should we go for media? So I think Parler and Telegram are probably the two that, that's where a Voice for Choice advocacy has moved to. We cannot support a lot of different platforms. We're still on Facebook, we're still on Twitter. And then we're on Parler and Telegram. They have very different feels to them. All our content is consistent across all platforms. So if you went to a Voice for Choice Advocacy's platform page or group on any of those platforms, you would say the same content coming from us. But the interaction from other people is very, very different. And so I think it's what you're looking for. Both Parler and Telegram are very clunky. There's a reason why Facebook's addictive, because they've made it super easy and they've got the algorithms working and all of that stuff. But I would find the channels on either Telegram or Parler that resonate with you. Now, for me, I don't go on any of those. We have somebody that posts our stuff out, but I honestly have a handful of people that I trust and that I go to for my information. I also go to, I listen to every press conference there is from Newsom. I go to the pro-vaccine sites. I'm on all the CDC information. I'm on the World Health Organization information. I'm on a whole bunch of pro-vaccine email lists. Because to me, that information is really interesting. I'm on a whole bunch of lists that are very academic and just send out research papers on certain topics. And I look at everything. I look at beyond vaccines. So I look at GMOs and EMFs and baby food and those types of things. So my list is much broader. But I look for the people that I trust. So, the Corbett report, James Corbett, I think he's great. Children's Health Defense puts out good stuff. Del Bigtree on the High Wire. I actually don't watch him that much. I watch his clips because most of the stuff that he puts on, I've already seen. I've already seen something, something related to it because I'm on all these different groups and emails and that kind of thing. The Greater Reset is about agorism and freedom cells. Vin Armani, who he used to have a podcast. Various different people that I have a bunch on the food side of things, but to me, you want to look for the people you resonate with and the people who are giving both sides of the story, and looking at the truth, looking at what is being censored. So the other people that I look for are the people who have been censored, because those people are clearly saying something that the technocrats don't want us to know. So hopefully that answered your question. Are there fetal cells in the J&J or Novavax? So fetal cells are used in the creation of the J&J. I believe they're in the creation of the Novavax. They may just be in the testing of the Novavax. But every COVID vaccine has fetal cells used either in the creation of them or in the testing of them. So if you don't want fetal cells inside you, the J&J vaccine is not one to get. It's the reason, it's part of the reason why I wouldn't get it. But if you have issues with, aborted fetal cells being used for testing, every COVID vaccine is used. And Voice for Choice Advocacy put out a document that gave all the religious reasons, all the ingredients and the religious reasons for not using those vaccines. We just updated that. We haven't released it yet, but I'm just in the process of double checking it. We should release it this week or next week, on the on that includes the COVID vaccines now. And the other thing that we've put together, which I'm also checking, which will go out in the same email, is a list of all the fetal cell strains, the cell lines, what they were used for in the creation and in the testing, what vaccines they were used for. Complete list. So look out for that. Next question. I'm going to hurry up because we've got half an hour and I have 60 questions. I've heard from a health talk that whatever is in the vaccines can be transmitted through fluids containing DNA, blood, sperm, breast milk, and damages others. Have you heard about this? What about shedding and saliva? I have not heard that directly, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, again, the research has not been done. We don't know. Could it happen? Yes. Is it happening? I don't know. We don't have the answers. Okay, when it comes to mask exemptions at school for kids with medical exemptions, I'm reading contradictory guidelines from the CDE, who recently issued a letter stating that kids with medical conditions should be accommodated, and the Los Angeles Health Department, who told the head of my child's school that accommodations such as a sneeze guard would not be approved and my child would have to continue remote learning. Do you know whether the California Department of Education supersedes the local health department or other way around? I'm trying to get my child schooled in at least in the least restrictive environment, on-site versus remote school learning. So if your child has special needs and medical issues come under that, you are right that the Department of Education said that they should be allowed into school with the least restrictions. There are definitely schools who are countering that. My advice to you is go contact Educate Advocate. Their organization is amazing and they have helped parents in this situation. So it's educateadvocateca.com is their website, and I would contact them because they are the pros on this and will help you on a person by person basis. What have you heard about opt-outs for those who are allergic to the additives in all vaccines? Pfizer and Moderna contain polyethylene glycol and J&J contains polysorbate AT and ethanol. These chemicals are highly dangerous. The FDA fact sheets get any shots, but companies aren't acknowledging this. So I think if you get allergy tested for those and you can show that you have an allergy towards them, and my recommendation is go do that, then I think you could get a medical exemption based on that and you would be medically exempt. What about HIPAA laws and privacy? I'm not sure what you are referring to, but yes, both of those apply to things like vaccine passports and to people asking you. Can vaccinated family member infect an unvaccinated member? Do they shed viruses? So they supposedly don't shed virus, but they could be asymptomatic carriers and transmit the virus if they were exposed to it. Can you summarize where we are on COVID vaccine reactions? Do you think the vaccine will cause more injury than COVID would have? I think in the long term they will. You can go to the VAERS. If you go to metalerts.org, you can sort and look at the reactions. That comes from the VAERS reporting system. You have to realize that not everyone is reporting there. For example, we've been primed, we have been primed that the second dose of the vaccine is going to lay you flat for 2 days. So my guess is the majority of people that have been laid flat for 2 days did not report that to VAERS as a reaction, because they were told it's normal. I think there are also people that are having reactions that they don't put 2 and 2 together, that maybe they've had a chronic condition and it got worse after the vaccine, but they're not putting 2 and 2 together that the vaccine may have caused that, may have stimulated their immune system. Do I think the vaccine will cause more injury than COVID would have? I don't think we know that answer. I don't think we will ever know that answer, because I don't know that we have the real numbers on COVID. I think we're looking at PCR tests. We're looking at people who died with COVID rather than from COVID. So I think that's I don't think we will ever be able to answer that unless there is a mass vaccine reaction that happens when people are exposed to COVID, or there's mass cancer or something like that. Okay. Do you have any local meetings in the Bay Area so we can help you with this cause? I am also here in the Bay Area. My recommendation is get on the Stand Up California list for Santa Clara County, San Mateo. Most of the stuff that we, Voice for Choice Advocacy, need help with can be done by anyone worldwide. We have a lot of online projects, and if you do want to be a volunteer for Voice for Choice Advocacy, we would love your help. Email Christina@voiceforchoice.org, and I will just say, I really want to volunteer. It sort of goes in waves, and what we need help with. We just got over a huge hump of a wave, and a lot of the stuff you'll see in the next weeks we're churning out because we've gotten so much accomplished. But what I do is I have a list of people that have said they want to volunteer. I'll send out an email saying, okay, we need volunteers for so many hours, this week and next, who wants to help? And then if you have time, you can sign up for it. But definitely email me that you want to volunteer, and also if you have any special talents. So for example, we have a few paralegals that we get involved in things. We have researchers, we have people that are graphic designers. So, definitely if you have a special talent, definitely let me know as well. And thank you in advance. What's the main difference between the J&J and the AstraZeneca vaccine? I heard they're very similar. So I'm wondering if blood clotting issues occur in the AstraZeneca. They probably could. So the main difference between the AstraZeneca and the J&J vaccine is the AstraZeneca vaccine uses a monkey adrenovirus. I think I've got this. One of them, I may be confusing it. One of them uses a monkey adrenovirus as the backbone to put the spike protein on. The other one uses a human adrenovirus and puts the spike protein on. Other than that, they are very, very similar. So could blood clotting issues occur with the J&J? They could. But it may be something to do with that difference in what the backbone that the spike protein is put on. Or it may be one of the other ingredients in them. Their ingredients aren't exactly identical. Could it happen? Yes. I don't think we've had enough J&J vaccines roll out to see it. The AstraZeneca vaccine has been rolled out in Europe since January. So we've had a few months for it to happen. We're now seeing it, because one of these doesn't count. You have to have a number of the same issue happening for it to become a signal and for people to question it. And I don't think we're there with the J&J vaccine. How can we be treated as like we were sick when we were not sick. How can this even be legal? Yes, I agree with you. Is there currently any federal state database that keeps info about all vaccinated people so far? I've heard this app being developed in New York. You enter malls or stores. So I answered that question. There are state databases, but not everyone is put in the state database. If the COVID survival rate for all ages is 99.96, according to the WHO, Johns Hopkins COVID Resource Group, what is the goal of the vaccines or vaccine passports? Money. I think one of the Moderna is getting $18.4 billion this year from their vaccine. So, you know, it's very, very much money related. Okay, next question. Just going through this. How do we get these mask mandates removed? More people get vaccinated, honestly, is the answer. But even with that, people are saying wear masks. Although it's interesting, you know, I was out today and I noticed so many fewer people wearing masks in just walking up and down the street. But the answer is, you know, I don't think we get rid of them until, in California, until we've got a huge population vaccinated, or until the CDC says they're no longer necessary, which may be never. When you speak on the actual CDC VAERS reports on the COVID vaccine, when will you speak? Okay, I did speak to the COVID vaccine. Last time I asked this question, you dismissed it because you said that RFK Children's Health Defense reports them. I've personally seen those reports on CDC VAERS site. Anyone can search the site. The COVID vaccine injuries reported to VAERS that passes 50,000, 2,249 deaths, 7,000 serious injuries, a 3,000 increase in miscarriages and deaths. So I never dismissed them. So I don't dismiss the CDC VAERS reports. Do they happen? Are they there? Can you look them up? Absolutely. I personally like using metalerts.org, which allows you to create tables with certain filters. I think the key piece is, and what you may have interpreted as dismissal was my explanation why the CDC dismisses them, or why they have been dismissed, and that there isn't huge uproar from all these reactions. And that is that when you look through them, especially with the older people, which were, you know, the first probably 1,000 deaths, now it's becoming more, you know, younger people, but it's still a lot of old people. It's really hard to know that they're causation. So, you know, an 89-year-old person died a day after getting the vaccine, but then they were taking 10 medications and they were sick with diabetes, blah, 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 and blah. And to say it was the vaccine that caused them to die, anecdotally, there may be evidence for that. You know, the nursing home staff may say, oh, he was fine yesterday. He was not expected to die tomorrow. But when you look at the data just in VAERS, you know, they have a high comorbidity rate already. And so it's really hard to see. And so I think what you're getting at was my comment that I don't dismiss those reactions, but they are being dismissed. And I think it's only once we start mass vaccinating all ages, so under 50, that we are going to see the real numbers come out and people are going to pay more attention to it. You know, old people, they're just going to say, oh, they would have died anyway. So I think that's, but I never have dismissed any deaths. I do think they are real and they're there. Okay, I am a vaccine injury survivor. Mercury poisoning from the flu shot caused infertility, Bell's palsy, neurological symptoms like stroke, MS, Lyme's disease. I know vaccine caused injuries. I lived it. I recovered from it by detoxification. I find it unbelievable that you don't spend any time focused on the real actual vaccine injuries reported in CDC VAERS, which most people don't even know about and thus are dramatically underreported. So I think you know, I don't know where you're getting the impression that I don't spend time on it. You know, I do when people ask me about it, but I would say I'm probably one of the only people that has actually read every single death report in VAERS. There may be some others, but I have read every single one of them, and every week when a new one comes out, I read through them to understand who is dying. I do generalized tables and summary tables on the reactions to see what's coming up, their ages, whether they're higher, for example, they're higher among women, those types of things. I certainly don't dismiss the vaccine injury. It is very real. My point is, I think it gets dismissed by mainstream media. I was told that the worldwide reports of deaths are increasing after all this vaccination started. Do you know where we can see such data? Is any agency keeping track of this? There is a world death, what is it called? I don't remember what it's called, but there definitely is, broken down by country. They have specific COVID deaths, but they also have all deaths in the world that are reported, and I don't remember what it is. But if you look up, I'm pretty sure if you search like world COVID death reports, it's something like Worldometer or something like that. But if it comes up for COVID deaths, then just look on that site to see if you can see world deaths. My 6th grader has no vaccines and is being required to have all the shots before 7th grade. Can school deny her attending until all shots are given? They can deny her attending if she doesn't have the first shot of every type of vaccine. And then after that, if she's not on, whatever schedule, they can deny her, yes. Have you heard about the nasal spray they're developing? Yes, I think it's J&J. It's one of the existing ones. I believe it's J&J that are creating a nasal spray COVID vaccine. It is in clinical trials. I don't know more than that about it. Is it really a big deal to get a COVID test? I'd rather do that than be forced to take a vaccine. Is there an issue with this that I'm not aware of? So the question becomes, what's in, so if you're doing a saliva test and spitting out, then no, but you are conforming. So you are allowing the government or the place that you're trying to go to say that you are required to do that. So my first reaction is to say no. My second reaction is yes, if you have to do it, do the saliva test. The question with the COVID test, the nasal swabs and the throat swabs is what are on those swabs? So I have no proof that there is anything on those swabs, but there absolutely is nano dust, and there are these nano sized, so very, very small sized technology that Johns Hopkins has created that it looks like a star, and when it gets into your intestine, it clamps down and it releases medication. And that's what they were created for. And so there have been questions of, is there anything like that on the swabs? And when they're sticking them up your nose, are you inhaling it and it getting into your body? I have no proof of that, and I don't think anyone has proof of that. But is the technology in existence that they could do that? Yes. And so our recommendation is, if you have to get COVID tested, that you do it into the test. That you do it via saliva test. The other thing that I will say is, if you come back positive, make sure you go get another test, because the number of false positives is huge. The PCR tests, the majority of PCR tests are at a cycle of 40, where anything above 30, 35 is most likely false positive. Thank you so much for creating the Stand Up California platform. I'm so excited about it. My question concerns Big Pharma being free of liability from vaccine injuries. I'm wondering if they still can be free of liability if it will apply if negligence, fraud, or cover-up can be proven. So they are not liable for injuries. But for example, if there is a technical issue with their product, so if there's something wrong with their product, it had the wrong amount of ingredients in it, or, for example, the J&J vaccines, that there was a mess up with their ingredients. They caught it before any of those were distributed. But if you were given one of those, you could sue the company for that. And if there was fraud, yeah, they could be sued for fraud. They couldn't be sued for the vaccine injuries. My 5-year-old has Down syndrome. SeaWorld San Diego will not allow him to go in without a mask. They said that it doesn't completely follow the CDC requirements. People with mental disability allowed do not use a mask and use their own private rules. 2-year-olds and younger allowed. What can we do? go talk to Educate Advocate. Send your email to Educate Advocate. Again, it's educateadvocateca.com. They are amazing with special needs. They're the people that I go to when we have special needs questions. Do I think vaccine passports will go away after COVID? No, no. I think they're going to get worse. I think we will have, I don't think they're going to be vaccine passports, but I think they're going to be some form of social credit score like China has. Go look up social credit score in China. I mean, it is horrible. So do I think they're going to go away? No, I think it's going to get worse, which is why we need to stand up and not have them. I'm in the military. What if they try to mandate it on us? You are out of luck. I mean, vaccines in the military, they can't mandate it. They won't mandate it while it's emergency use authorization. But come next month, that's not going to be the case anymore. But if you are at their beck and call. I mean, they tested the anthrax vaccine on the military. So there is nothing. There is nothing you can do. If you go before you go into the military, you can claim a religious exemption, and then that stays with you. But you can't claim a religious exemption once you're in. And you know, the question becomes: if you claim a religious exemption before you go in, will they take you? Possibly not. Do you plan on having another sale on the True 47 masks in the near future? So we are not. Our sort of discount ran out. But I will say, so the True 47 masks, for people who aren't familiar with them, I don't have one with me, but they are very, very breathable silver mesh masks. So they're breathable, but they have silver on them. So any bacteria or viruses going in and out die on contact. The one thing I will say is if you have a order of 6 or more, we can give you a 20% discount. If you want that discount, email me and I can give it to you, but you have to order 6 or more because then we can get the discount. So the reason we were able to get a discount previously was because of the bulk that we could order in. And so True 47 allowed us to get a discount, but we are not doing the discounts anymore unless you have unless you have a larger order, in which case come to me and we can talk about it. Email me and we can talk about it. Okay. Is there any old style traditional COVID vaccine in the pipeline that you regard as less risky and might be considerable? So the one that I haven't looked into much is the Novavax one, and that one is of interest to me, but until they release their information to the FDA, it's really hard to get information on it. What they released to the FDA for emergency use authorization is a whole lot of information, which is where you can look at the ingredients, you can look at the profile, the safety profile, all of that stuff. Until it's on the market and they do that, it's really hard to tell. The only old style vaccine that's out there right now is the Chinese vaccine, but that has aluminum adjuvants in it, and it's a live vaccine, which when we had aluminum adjuvants in the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine was extremely dangerous. So I wouldn't take that one. My daughter is in 5th grade and has an IEP and a vaccine exemption. Do you think she'll be able to enter 7th grade since she has an IEP? Yes, if she's able to keep her IEP. What good evidence-based resource to discuss, share, RE, the topic of vaccines versus gene therapy for a science class? So I would look at, if I had to do this, I haven't done it, but if I were to look at that, I would look at the Moderna gene therapy mRNA clinical trials, which have only been phase 1, and look at what Moderna was doing pre-COVID. And I think there's a lot of information there. Will a negative test from LAUSD, whether it's swab or saliva, be good enough for travel? You have to look at where you're traveling and their requirements. So if it's done in person, possibly. Where can we get the form for the UC exemption for COVID vaccination? So UC hasn't required the COVID vaccination yet, so there is no exemption form at this time. Is age of consent for kids 12 for vaccines? It is in California for sexually transmitted vaccines because they can consent to any sort of sexually transmitted care. So at age 12, you can get an abortion without your parents knowing here in California. For other vaccines, that is not the case currently. I have a child going to college. Probably I will encourage her to go outside of California. I would. Is there anything to help college kids not having to get the vaccine? She's worried about the virus, but she believes she won't be able to participate in anything. The fear is being pushed. So I would just look at what the requirements are for each college. They're all different, and they're different in different states. Currently, none of the California campuses require the COVID vaccine, but I think that may change. Do you think booster shots will become mandatory? As I said, it really depends on what they look like, and I don't think any COVID vaccine is going to become mandatory per state or federal laws. It's going to be societally mandated. Should I be cautious in letting my special needs daughter go out with her coach who chose to vaccinate? Is there a window to keep a distance? Honestly, my question on that one is, what's the mental health issue more than the physical health issue? So I had somebody, ask me, well, my parents just got vaccinated. Should I have the grandparents come visit, in 2 weeks, within the first 2 weeks after getting both shots of the vaccine? And my question there is, what if the grandparents don't come and visit? What is the mental health? What's the emotional health? Because your immune system isn't just physical; it's emotional as well. It's psychological. It's physiological. And so, if seeing the grandparents after a year of not seeing them is going to make everyone happy, my guess is you're not going to come down with COVID or anything else from them. Are medical exemptions grandfathered for surviving grades? My child is in 3rd grade. Yes, you have till 7th grade, unless your doctor is put on probation, in which case they may not be. May is the optimal word there. Do we know if oncologists are generally promoting the COVID vaccine to cancer patients, or whether there is a concern they might be willing to write medical exemptions to this population? I think it is mixed. I think there's caution, but I do believe that they believe that it is safe, although there has been no research done on that. Okay, can you speak to SB 556 and SB 537? I just heard they will be heard in California soon. Your thoughts on whether they will pass? I think those two, I don't know the numbers by heart because I follow so many bills, but I believe those two have to do with Wi-Fi antennas, and the fact that and if I'm wrong, please put in the Q&A, put another question and correct me what the bills relate to. But I believe those two have to do with, actually they can't, because one of them is a Senate bill and one's Assembly bill. So this may not be, but I believe the two that you're talking about are the ability to put antennas, 5G antennas, on poles that now would not require city approval, so to speak. So right now it's up to cities to approve where 5G antennas go. And I have not looked into this in depth. There were bills similar 2 years ago, I want to say, that were not passed. Interestingly, firefighters are extremely against having poles anywhere near them, so they clearly know something. I think, yes, they are being heard if it's those two bills. I think it is worth opposing those bills. Officially, Voice for Choice advocacy doesn't fall within our mission, but I do think it's worth following them. They do have a lot of opposition with things like firefighters and larger cities. Cities don't want their jurisdiction taken away from them and things like that. So I think there is a chance that they will be, that they will not pass again, but it really depends on the opposition. The saliva test you mentioned from Costco, does it give you the results right away, or do you need to send them in? You have to send them in. So you spit into it, you give it to UPS, and it takes about 24 to 48 hours for them to get the results back to you. So it's relatively fast, but it is at least overnight, 2 nights. How widespread are counterfeit vaccine cards that, unless they are confirmed online, have fooled medical personnel, venue operators, and business requiring proof of vaccination? I have no idea. Are they out there? Yes. Senator Pan tweeted few days ago. I'm blocked from his tweets, but I saw it. He tweeted that the anti-vaxxers faked medical exemptions first, and I do not believe there are fake medical exemptions out there. There are medical exemptions that he doesn't agree with the criteria for. I don't believe there are fake medical exemptions. And now the anti-vaxxers are selling selling fake vaccine cards. And the premise of it was to stop eBay, Shopify, Facebook from allowing fake medical exemptions to be sold on their platforms. So he just let you know where to buy them. Do I think it's going to become rampant? Yes, it's actually one of the reasons why I don't think vaccine passports should be used. I mean, it's probably the lesser of all of the reasons, but it's one of the reasons, because you will no longer know who's really vaccinated and who's not. You know, personally, I think we have to stand up against the vaccines. We have to say no, we have to get out of the system. So, you know, to me, but will they be rampant if this is the way forward? Absolutely, absolutely. And so, you know, do I think they're out there? Yes. Do I think you can fake them relatively easy? Yeah. I mean, you just look at pictures of them, you can work it out. I'm not saying that you should do that, but anyway, is it true that cities that have vaccinated the most have the highest COVID cases now? It's certainly an interesting phenomenon, let's put it that way. I think we need to look at it, but you look at places like Israel that have vaccinated heavily and their cases are going up. So there's something there, but I don't think we have the answer at this point. Okay, I have 4 minutes and 16 questions, so I'm going to run over a little bit. Thank you for those of you who are still on, and I'm going to get through these questions. Can they set up COVID vaccine sites at schools and ask kids directly to get them, or do they need parent consent? So they do that with flu vaccines, and they require parent consent. Does that mean that they always get parent consent? No. Could they do it? Yes. And do I think that, you know, for example, high schoolers, do I think they need parental consent? Probably not as much. So is it a possibility? Yes. Does it happen with flu vaccines? Yes. Do I think that, you know, there should be parental consent and they you know, are going to ask for it? They should, but maybe not. Do you know anything about lithium spraying? I have read about it. Do I think it happens? You know, do I know that it happens? No. Could it happen? Yes. You know, spraying is actually the one place that we have zero control over what's in our air. You know, we have to breathe. And so my recommendation is good air purifiers in your house so that they're filtering out everything. And, you know, I sound crazy and conspiracy theory in saying that, but, you know, even if you take just the wildfires in California, you know, our air still hasn't gotten rid of what, you know, lingering effects of that from last year. And so, you know, my recommendation is, even if, regardless of what else is out there, just from things like wildfires and pollution, get a good air purifier in your house. Are there any support groups in Oakland for people who are against COVID vaccines? Go to standupcalifornia.com and join the Alameda group. Do you foresee a future, if there is one, in which humankind will have completely rejected the whole set of idea of vaccines, or will some vaccines always be useful? I think vaccines are going to change in the future. I don't think we will ever be free of not wanting disease, not wanting to not have disease, or not wanting to not be sick. So I think there's always a place for them. I actually, you know, I mean, there's a piece of me with this new mRNA technology, and some people are just like, oh my God, Christina, what are you thinking when I say this? But this new mRNA technology may be the technology of the future. You know, it may be the answer to preventing contagious diseases. We have no idea. We have, you know, we haven't done the research on it to be able to say that or not say that, you know. So to me, I think there is a group of people that are alternative minded, that are not scared of disease. I think that's the key piece of it. You know, I'm not scared of getting sick because I'm healthy. You know, I eat well, I have an air purifier, I make sure that I'm as healthy as I can possibly be. Does that mean that every now and then, you know, I eat out, I eat crap? Yes, of course, I'm human. But mentally and physically, I am healthy. And so to me, do I think there are a group of people that will bring that forward? Yes. I mean, you know, my answer to COVID has nothing to do with vaccines or treatment to COVID. The number of people that have died and that have been seriously sick from COVID, 80% of them are obese or overweight. The answer to COVID is get people healthy, get people eating well, get people knowing what nutrition is, get rid of fast food, get rid of all of that. We would have a completely different country if we were healthy. You know, we have sick care, we don't have health care. And so this, you know, the fact that people are dying from COVID who are obese, that's, you know, that's where I would start if I were changing the world. I'm trying to change it a little bit at a time, but I'm not that far ahead. You provide so much information and do so much to advocate for people. Sometimes I wonder if you get any sleep. So I am so sorry someone earlier found it unbelievable that you appeared to not do something. I hope you know how much you appreciate it. Thank you for everything you do. I do it for people like you. I do it for all of you. I don't sleep much. I mean, one of my lobbyists makes that joke every time we have a meeting and I need to get someone information. She's like, she doesn't sleep, she'll get it to you. Thankfully, I don't need much sleep. And I have amazing, you know, people surrounding me that support me. So, but I, you know, every person that I come in contact with in this movement, you know, the reason why I advocate is the reason I do this. You know, and that's, I'm passionate about it. I'm sure people who watch this realize that. So, but I appreciate the thanks and I appreciate people reaching out because, you know, it makes me realize why I do things I do. Can the antigen COVID test be mandated for teachers? Can the flu shot be mandated for employees? I think I answered both of those questions. We are running over, so go back and look at what I said. If I didn't answer your question, definitely you can send me an email on specifics. In the COVID clinical trials, what is used as the placebo group? Is it just normal saline or something else? So I actually went in and looked at this recently because I'd looked at it in the phase 1 and 2 clinical trials. And in many of the vaccines, it was not saline. And in many other countries, it's not saline. But in the US, thankfully, it's interesting because ICANN and Dell, Highwire, they definitely, you know, pushed for saline to be used. But at the very beginning of the trials, people like Peter Hotez, who is completely pro-vaccine, Paul Offit, completely pro-vaccine, they specifically also said, we have to do these trials against saline. And so I think, you know, I don't know who gets credit for it, but there is definitely a push at the beginning of the clinical trials on this to use saline. And the Moderna, the Pfizer, and the J&J vaccine all used saline in the US. The AstraZeneca in the UK used the meningitis vaccine, and I believe the 3 that are approved here used other vaccines or sort of the minus the antigen, you know, whatever's left in the vaccine in different countries. But I do believe from what I could tell, having looked at it last week for somebody, they all did use saline here in the US. Thank you, Christina, for everything you do. I share your links endlessly on Telegram. Well, you're welcome. And I'm happy to do it. Okay, we have 11. We keep adding questions. I'm going to keep going because we're not too far off. Is Senator Pan on his way out? He leaves office in 2022, at the end of 2022. So he will be gone in 2023, and so will Lorena Gonzalez. Do you have any sense whether Washington State will be easier on mandates? My son got accepted to UC, but also to U of W. He doesn't want to move away. It's really hard to say what's possible in 1 to 2 years. I think there's a much better chance in Washington State, yes. Do I think that they are, you know, they've encroached on mandates. They got rid of the religious the personal belief exemption for the MMR vaccine for school, but there's still a religious exemption, and there's a personal belief exemption for everything else. So, you know, in the greater scheme of things, they didn't get rid of as much as California. So I think there's a better chance, you know, out of the two, I would 100% go to Washington over California. Okay, I'm on ivermectin prophylactically because I will be shortly working with in inches of unmasked space. Ironically, vaccinated people are more of a risk to me than I am to them, but people are not educated. Any idea about how to broach the subject? So far, not doing well in educating others. People automatically assume it's of no use. I'm not sure whether you mean ivermectin or the vaccine. But I think you just have to work out, the key piece of talking to anyone, I find, is to work out where they're coming from. So what is it? Are they afraid of COVID? What are they afraid of? Is it that they have comorbidity? Is it that you know, they're worried of transmitting it? Are they doing it for the greater good? Find out why they're doing it. Listen to them. Listen to what their concerns are, and then address their concerns. Because their concerns are usually pretty specific, or their fears are usually pretty specific. My friend is pregnant and I'm trying to convince her husband to delay vaccines. He wants to vaccinate according to the CDC schedule. She asked me for help. I recommended Paul Thomas and MVIC. Do you have any other recommendations for her to educate herself or her husband's on the benefits of delaying? So I think I would watch, so my favorites are the Vaccine Safety Manual by Neil Miller. That goes through every disease and every vaccine. And so my question to people who are pregnant or going to have their first baby is, what disease are you really scared of? So most people aren't scared of polio from their child getting polio. Most people aren't scared of hepatitis B. Most people aren't scared of diphtheria. Tetanus, maybe. Whooping cough. Measles, mumps, rubella. And so I asked them, which one of those are you most scared of? And do the research for that disease. So what are the risks of the disease? What are the risks of something happening for that disease? And what's the vaccine? And what are the risks of the vaccine? And Neil Miller's book, The Vaccine Safety Manual, goes through that. For every disease, it has the symptoms and the risks of the disease, and then it has the vaccine and the risks of the vaccine. And so that's sort of the way in that I do it. If they want to get more in depth, Dissolving Illusions by Suzanne Humphreys and Roman, I don't know how to say his last name, is an amazing book, but it's really dense and thick. So you have to be committed to that one. Movies, on a Voice for Choice advocacy /shop, we have a whole bunch of movies that I recommend. So Vaxxed is one, Injecting Aluminum is one, The Greater Good. Those are probably the three main ones. I feel like I'm missing one, but those are probably the three main movies that I would tell them to watch. Out of the three of them, I probably would start with Injecting Aluminum. It's most sort of balanced for people who are questioning. Are you aware of any lawsuits against CDC governors of Ohio, New Mexico, and Florida by Pam Popper's organization? They have proof that there was never a pandemic, proof that PCR COVID testing is fraudulent, proof that COVID death certificates, ICD codes, over-reporting, deaths to launder money to hospitals, and promote the narrative of enforcing the vaccines and creating vaccine passports. I am aware of them. I'm very skeptical of the legal system here in the US. Having gone through a lawsuit on SB 277 that had nothing to do with polio, but then having it thrown out because of polio, I'm just skeptical of legal cases. They are as biased as the legislative system. And so I say good on them, keep trying, but I wouldn't hang my hat on that. We are, in California, we are wanting an audit done of some of those things, because not necessarily to disprove the pandemic, but to show the real number of cases, and the real number of people who died from COVID and not with COVID, those types of things. So that we have a real number. As I said before, I just don't think we have any numbers. We don't know the numbers. Because there hasn't been consistent reporting. Yay, 2 more questions. Okay. Can you get your kids' vax info taken out of the care system? You cannot get it taken out. You can lock it so that anyone, so for example, schools can go in and type your kid's name in, and it will say whether they've been vaccinated or not if your children are in the system. You can lock that so that your child's information isn't automatically downloadable by the authorized people, but you can never get it taken out. And people like like CDPH, like the California Department of Public Health, have access to that information regardless, because they have sort of an override into it. Last question. Are there elements of the mRNA vaccines that can pass through breast milk or the placenta aside from the antibodies? We have no idea. The tests haven't been done. The trials haven't been done. Is it possible? Probably. Do we know? We don't know. Anyway, it is 9:11 and I have answered 103 questions, 104 questions. I just want to say thank you so much for this, for asking the questions, because without the questions, I wouldn't have anything to answer. So anyway, so thank you so much. Just to go through, if you want to support a Voice for Choice advocacy, you can do so with volunteering. Financial donations are always welcome. People say, well, what do you use the money for? It's number one, to hire people to help, do the research and do the background stuff. We have lobbyists, but it's just, there's a lot of education resources that we can do with finances. So volunteering, money donations, definitely sign up for Stand Up California. If you go to standupcalifornia.com, join your local group. I will say it takes about 24 hours or up to 24 hours for when you sign up to when you actually will get accepted. Make sure you put in your full name, because if you don't have a real name in there, you will not be allowed to join the group. That's one of our criteria. And become, my feeling is speak to people, open your mouth. Even if it's one person a day, it's, there's one more person that has heard your opinion. And heard your, and it's not about changing their mind immediately. It is about, it's about planting the seed and then watering it. And so if you can plant the seed, even if it doesn't happen immediately, it's about growing that and nurturing it and helping people understand, because it may not be you. It takes about 10 times for people to hear things to then be like, maybe I should do something different. Anyway, good night. I appreciate all of you, and take care.